I close cases for an office that doesn't appear on any list of public services, and 3 days ago I was asked to close a case involving me. My supervisor put the folder on my desk the way he puts every folder on my desk. The tab faced me. The case number was visible at the corner. I read the number first because I always read the number first. Then I read the name. Then I read it again. He waited until I looked up. And when I did, he said, very quietly, that he was sorry and that I had until Friday. I have been at this job a long time. I don't know exactly how long, which is a thing I've gotten used to. When people ask in conversation, I say a decade. When I'm filling out a form for a new bank account or a doctor's office, I write 2011 because that's what's on my hiring paperwork, and the math always seems plausible enough. The truth is I started here on a Wednesday in autumn, and I cannot tell you the year. The office doesn't celebrate work anniversaries. There is no plaque in the break room. There is no break room. There is a small kitchen with a coffee maker that produces something darker and more bitter than it has any right to, and a window onto a courtyard where pigeons sometimes land and walk in circles and leave. The work is paperwork. We are the part of the missing persons apparatus that no one wants to staff. After a person has been missing for 10 years, their file gets reclassified as long active. After 20, it gets reclassified as terminal. The active cases stay with the police. The long active cases stay with the state. The terminal cases come to us. We don't go looking. We close. A terminal case ends with one of 3 decisions, written in pencil first and ink last in a small box at the bottom of the cover sheet. Located, deceased, abandoned. Located means the person has been found alive and reintegrated, which I have written maybe 4 times in my career here, and only after another agency did the actual work. Deceased means the evidence supports the legal presumption of death, which permits a family to settle the estate and stop waiting. Abandoned means the family stopped paying attention and the system has moved on, and the file is closed with no funeral, no recovery, no answer. And the person on the cover sheet remains nominally alive in a database somewhere and nominally absent in every other way that matters. Most of my work is deceased. That is the work the office exists for. We are the polite face of telling people they are not getting their husband back, their daughter back, their brother back. We do not call them. The state calls them. We just file the paperwork that permits the state to call. I have been doing this long enough that the language of the cover memos has become a kind of meter to me, a rhythm I can feel in my hands when I type. Subject was last observed. No credible contact has been reported. The evidentiary threshold, undersection, etc. I am telling you all of this because I want you to understand that when my supervisor put a folder on my desk and the tab said Lang, Daniel R., I was not surprised by a folder. Folders come to me every day. I was surprised by the name. The name is mine. I did not understand it for several seconds. I understood that the letters spelled my name. I did not understand what they meant in that order on a tab. I think I said something to Mr. Hewitt. I'm not sure what. And I think he said something like, "Take your time." He's a small man, my supervisor. He has watery eyes and good shoes. He has done this job longer than I have done any job. He sat in the chair across from my desk, which is a chair he never sits in, and he folded his hands on his knee and he waited. I opened the folder. There was a photograph clipped to the inside cover. It was me. I was younger in it. The face was unmistakably mine. Same nose, same mouth, same way of looking slightly past the camera as if I had been distracted at the moment of the picture. The man in the picture was wearing a button-down shirt I did not own. He had hair I did not have anymore. He was perhaps 35. He looked in a way I am not sure how to describe except by saying it, alive in a different way than I feel. The cover sheet beneath the photograph gave me a birth date. I knew the birth date. It was mine. It gave an address in a town I had been to maybe twice in the years I could remember. It gave a date of last contact. It was 14 years and 3 months ago. It gave a reporting party. Her name was Marin Longa, age 8 at filing. The relationship checked off in the box as daughter. I have a daughter. I want to be careful with you here. I want to be careful not to dramatize this moment, because if I dramatize it, I will lose the thing that actually happened, which is that I sat at my desk and looked at the words, daughter, age 8, and felt a kind of slow, soft, terrible recognition rising in my body the way nausea rises before you know you're sick. I did not remember having a daughter. I did not remember her name. I did not remember the address. I knew, looking at the photograph, that the man in the shirt I did not own had a daughter named Marin because the folder said so, and because the folder was about him, and because the folder was about me. Mr. Hewitt waited until I closed the cover, and then he said again that he was sorry. He said it had been allowed to sit longer than was usual. He said the responsible party, meaning the daughter, meaning her, had refiled extension paperwork every year on the anniversary, which is technically the legal mechanism that prevents a long active case from becoming terminal on schedule. He said that ordinarily this would not be possible without an attorney, but that she had retained one, or interned for one, or had simply been determined enough to figure it out alone. He did not know which. He said the case had now been long active for 14 years, which is unusual but not unheard of, and that the office had decided it was time. I asked him, and this is the only question I asked at the meeting that he answered directly. I asked him why I had to be the one to close it. He said, because no one else can. He stood up and he put a small plain envelope on my desk, sealed with his initials on the flap. He said inside was the standard packet: addresses, photographs, transit vouchers, the names of people I would need to interview if I chose to investigate, and the names of people the office preferred I did not interview. He said I had until Friday. He said I should take care of myself this week. He said that whatever I needed, the office would provide. Then he left, and I sat at my desk with a folder containing my own life until the courtyard outside got dark and the pigeons went wherever pigeons go. I went home that night and tried to eat soup and could not, and sat in the chair I always sit in and looked at the wallpaper I'd been looking at for years and could not tell you how long I'd been renting that apartment or how I'd come to choose it. The lease was in my name. The renewal forms came every August. The rent came out of an account at the credit union I had been told to use during my hiring orientation. There was furniture in the apartment that I did not remember buying. There was a coffee mug from a city I did not remember visiting. There was, on the bookshelf, a copy of a novel I would never have chosen with a bookmark a third of the way through it. I had lived for years inside the surfaces of someone else's habits without noticing they weren't mine. I want to tell you about the office because the office is part of this and I owe it the truth. The Office of Reconciliations occupies 4 floors of a brick building between a dental practice and a paint and wallpaper store. There is no signage. The directory in the lobby lists us simply by floor number and a small phrase: government. There is a security desk on the first floor and a woman named Inez behind it, and Inez has been there as long as I have, and Inez knows everyone's face. When I started, on the Wednesday in autumn, whose year I do not know, Inez gave me a laminated badge and a folded sheet of paper with my desk number and the words, "Welcome back," although I had never been here before. The other clerks, there are perhaps 30 of us across the 4 floors, work mostly in silence. We are not unkind to each other. We pass in the kitchen and nod. We share lunch sometimes. We have a yearly potluck in December that nobody seems to enjoy, and everyone seems to feel obligated to attend. And Mr. Hewitt brings a bottle of decent red wine and pours small glasses for whoever is willing. We do not generally talk about how we came to work here. New clerks arrive every few months. I think I noticed 3 new clerks in the past year. They arrived already trained somehow, already knowing where the supply closet was, already familiar with the database. I never asked any of them where they had worked before. They never volunteered. It did not seem rude not to ask. It seemed like the established pattern of the place. There is a woman named Bernice on the 3rd floor who has been here longer than anyone. I had spoken to Bernice maybe 100 times across the years, always about cases, never about anything else. Bernice is a heavy woman in her 60s who wears cardigans even in summer and keeps a small framed photograph of a dog on her desk. The dog is a yellow Labrador. The photograph is faded enough to look brown rather than yellow. Bernice has, in the years I have known her, never mentioned the dog to me or to anyone. I went to see Bernice on Tuesday morning. This was the day after Mr. Hewitt put the folder on my desk. I slept maybe 3 hours. I knocked on the frame of her cubicle and she looked up from her screen. And she looked at me the way a woman looks at a person she has been expecting for some time, and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, sit down." I sat down. She said, "He gave it to you." I said, "How did you know?" She said, "Mr. Hewitt told me. He tells me when it's about to happen. He thinks I help." I asked her if she did. She said, "Sometimes." I asked her then the thing I had come to ask, which was whether she had ever closed a case involving herself. She said yes. I asked when. She said 1978. We sat there for a while. Bernice has the kind of face that holds still when she is thinking, the way some old people's faces do, as if all the small movements they used to make have been worn smooth by use. She told me in a voice that did not change pitch much that she had walked into the office on a March morning in 1976 after leaving a husband she did not love and a small son she did love, and she had been here ever since. She told me that her son's case had been opened by her husband 3 weeks after she left, and that it had stayed long active for 2 years, and that when Mr. Hewitt's predecessor put the folder on her desk in 1978, the son was 4 years old and being raised by his grandmother because the husband had drunk himself into a hospital and could not be trusted. I asked her what she had decided. She said deceased. She did not look away when she said it. She said it the way you say a fact you have already paid for. She said that she had decided that the kindest thing for the son, the kindest thing for the grandmother, the kindest thing in the long arithmetic of the choice, was to be dead on paper. The son would grieve a dead mother instead of waiting forever for a living one who was not coming. The grandmother would be able to make arrangements. The husband, when he sobered, would have a stone to stand at instead of a question to keep open. I asked her if she'd ever regretted it. She said every day. She said that the dog in the picture belonged to her son. The grandmother had sent her a letter years after the case was closed through the office because the grandmother had figured out at some point that an office existed and that her daughter-in-law might be inside it. The letter had been short and not unkind. It said that the son was 9 and had a yellow lab named Marigold and was doing well in school. There had been a photograph of the dog clipped to the letter. Bernice had not been allowed to write back. She had been told that writing back would unmake the decision she had made. She'd kept the photograph on her desk for 43 years. I asked her, "What should I do?" She said, "I cannot tell you that. I will tell you what I tell anyone who comes to my desk before Friday. I will tell you that there are 3 boxes at the bottom of the cover sheet, and only 2 of them are real choices because abandonment is the office's word for cowardice, and you will not be permitted to use it. I will tell you that the deceased is a kindness you give to people who have waited too long. I will tell you that location is the only one of the 3 that costs you anything, and that the cost is the thing you walked into this building to avoid." She put her hand on my hand for a moment, and then she took it away. She turned back to her screen. I stood up and I went back to my desk and I read the folder all the way through. I want to tell you what was in it because the folder is part of this and I owe it the truth. The cover sheet I have already described. The photograph I have already described. Behind the cover sheet, there were 67 pages of documents arranged in the office's standard order. Identification, last known activity, witness statements, follow-up reports, family declarations, evidentiary inventory, and finally, at the very back of the file, in a plastic sleeve, anything in the subject's own handwriting that had been preserved by the reporting party. The identification section was clinical and easy. Daniel Robert Lang, born 1976 in a small city in the upper Midwest, height 6'1", hair brown, eyes brown, no distinguishing marks, college graduate in mechanical engineering, employed as a quality control engineer for a manufacturer of agricultural equipment until 2011. Married 2002. 1 child, daughter Marin, born 2003. The last known activity section was a single page. It said that on the evening of June 17, 2011, the subject had told his wife he was going to the grocery store. The wife was at that time in stage 4 pancreatic cancer and was being cared for at home by hospice. The subject had taken his keys and his wallet. He had not taken his phone. The wife had become concerned at approximately 10 p.m. when he had not returned. The hospice nurse had called the police at 11:15. The subject's car had been recovered 3 days later in the long-term parking lot of a regional train station. There was no surveillance footage from the platform. There were no debit card transactions after the afternoon of June 17th. There was no use of his social security number anywhere for the next 14 years. The witness statements were short. The hospice nurse had stated that the subject had seemed quiet that day, but not unusually so. A neighbor had seen him standing on the front step at approximately 7 p.m. smoking a cigarette, which she said was strange because she had never seen him smoke. The grocery store had no record of his arrival. The follow-up reports were repetitive. Quarterly searches, all negative. No body recovered. No claims on any account. No medical records anywhere. The family declarations were 2 pages and were the hardest pages in the folder. The first declaration was from the wife. It was dated July 11, 2011, and it was 3 sentences long. It said that her husband had been a good man, that she did not believe he had killed himself, and that she wanted the case kept open until her daughter was old enough to understand. It was signed in a shaky hand. She died 17 days later. The second declaration was from the daughter, filed when she turned 18 in 2021. It was longer. It said that she was the daughter of Daniel Lang, that she had been 8 years old when her father disappeared, that her mother had died 15 days after that she had been raised by her maternal grandmother, that she had become an adult on the previous Tuesday, and that she was formally requesting that her father's case remain open in perpetuity for as long as she lived, and that she would refile the necessary paperwork every year on the anniversary, and that she would do so until she died, and that if she died before her father was located, she would leave instructions in her will for the case to continue. It was signed in a steady hand. The evidentiary inventory listed 3 items: a wedding ring found in the cup holder of the subject's car, a grocery list in the subject's handwriting found folded in the visor of the car, a photograph of the subject's daughter at age 7 found in the subject's wallet, which had been recovered from the glove compartment. The plastic sleeve at the back of the file contained the grocery list: milk, bread, apples, soup for Carla. The list was in my handwriting. I knew it was my handwriting, the way you know your own face in a mirror. I knew also that I had not written it in years, and that the man who had written it had been intending to come home. I sat with the folder for an hour. I sat with it until the daylight changed in the window. Then I closed it and I put it in my drawer, and I went out and I want to tell you about the address because the address is part of this and I owe it the truth. The address on the cover sheet was a small ranch house on a street called Whitlock Avenue in a town 2 hours from where I now lived. The office had given me a transit voucher. I took a bus. The bus ride was long and I did not read on the bus. I looked out the window at fields and gas stations and small towns that all had a Dollar General and a Subway and an American flag on a pole in front of a fire station. The towns thinned as I went north. The road got narrower. The land got flatter. By the time the bus pulled into the depot in the town on Whitlock Avenue, the sky was the color of the underside of an old saucepan, and a thin rain was starting. I walked to the address. I had loaded it into my phone, but I found as I walked that I did not need the phone. My feet knew the route. My feet knew the route, the way feet know the route to the kitchen in your own house in the dark. I turned left where I needed to turn left. I crossed the street at the place I would have crossed it. I knew which corner the mailbox was on. I knew the smell of the laurel hedge 2 doors down before I smelled it. I stood across the street from the house for a long time. It was a small house, pale yellow siding, white trim, a concrete walkway with a crack across it that I remembered, although I do not know how I could have remembered the crack. It had been there before I left. Surely it had widened since. Surely the people who lived there now had patched it once or twice in 14 years. But I remembered the crack going the same direction it was going now, and the way the moss grew on the north side of it, and I felt the kind of dizziness you feel when you stand up too fast. A car was in the driveway. A child's bicycle was on the lawn. The siding had been repainted at some point, perhaps recently, because the trim around the window I knew had been the kitchen window. Did not match the trim around the window I knew had been our bedroom window. There were curtains on the bedroom window that Carla would not have chosen, and a wind chime hanging from the eaves that she would have hated. A woman came out of the house with a dog on a leash. She was perhaps 40. She locked the door behind her. She did not look in my direction. The dog pulled at the leash. They walked east, away from where I was standing. I did not move until they were gone. I did not go up to the house. I did not knock. I did not need to. The house was not where I needed to go. I want to tell you about my daughter, because she is the reason for all of this, and she is the part I have been avoiding telling you about. I found Marin's name on the 3rd page of the folder and her current address on the 5th. The office had been thorough. She was 22. She had graduated from the state university the previous spring with a degree in social work. She was employed by a community center in a small city, 40 minutes from the town on Whitlock Avenue. She had been employed there for 4 months. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store. She drove a 2014 Honda. She had no criminal record. She voted in every election. She filed the renewal paperwork on her father's case every year on June 17th. I went to the community center on Wednesday. It was a 1-story building on the corner of a block that also had a laundromat and a pawn shop and a vacant lot with grass growing through the asphalt. There was a hand-lettered sign in the window of the center that read, "After-school program, Tuesdays and Thursdays, all welcome." The door was propped open with a rubber wedge. I could hear voices inside. Children's voices. The kind of low, constant noise that children make when they are concentrating on something the adults have given them to do. I stood across the street and I watched her come out at 3:45 for what I assumed was her break. She came out with a paper cup of coffee and she sat on the bench in front of the building, and she pulled her phone out and she did not look at it. She just held it. She was small. She had her mother's hair and her mother's cheekbones and her grandmother's jaw. She was wearing a navy blue cardigan that was too big for her shoulders, which I knew, without knowing how I knew, was a cardigan that had belonged to Carla. I watched her drink her coffee. I watched her stand up and go back inside. I did not cross the street. I went back to the bus depot. I went back to my apartment. I sat in the chair I always sit in. I did not eat. I did not sleep much. On Thursday, I went to see Mr. Hewitt. His office is on the 4th floor. He has a window that looks down on the courtyard. He has on his wall 3 diplomas from universities I have never heard of, and a print of a painting I do not recognize that shows a man standing at the edge of a lake holding a hat. He was at his desk when I came in. He looked up. He gestured at the chair across from him without saying anything. I sat. I asked him to tell me plainly what each of my choices would do. He folded his hands on his desk. He said, "I will tell you." He said, "If you write deceased on the cover sheet, the case becomes a terminal case with that disposition. The state will send your daughter a letter informing her that her father has been declared legally dead. She will be permitted to grieve. She will be permitted to stop refiling. She will be issued a death certificate. The estate, such as it is, will be closed. You will return to your desk on Monday morning. You will continue to work here. You will not remember her. You will not remember the address. You will not remember the grocery list. You will live the rest of your life as a clerk in this office, and you will not know what you gave up. You will be content. Many of us are content." He paused. He said, "If you write on the cover sheet, the case becomes a terminal case. With that disposition, the state will send your daughter a letter informing her that her father has been located alive. She will be given a phone number. She will call it if she chooses. If she calls it, you will answer. You will remember everything. You will be released from the office. You will be a man of 55 who has been functionally absent from the world for 14 years and who has no employment history that anyone will believe, no savings, no medical records, and no relationships outside of the people in this building. The office will provide a stipend for 1 year. After that, you will be on your own. You will live the rest of your life with what you did and what you remember, and you will have to make whatever you can out of what is left. He paused. He said, "If you do not write anything, the case will revert to the long-acting. Your daughter will continue to refile. The office will reassign the case to another clerk in approximately 8 years, when you have aged past the point at which it would be plausible for you to be alive. That clerk will write deceased. You will not be informed of it. You will continue to work here." He said, "Those are the 3 choices." He said, "I'm sorry it is this way." I asked him, "How long have you been doing this?" He said, "A long time." I asked him, "Were you ever a case?" He said, "Yes, 1962. I wrote about the deceased. I have not regretted it the way Bernice has regretted hers, but I have not been at peace with it either. I do not know if there is a version of this in which a person is at peace." I asked him, "What did you do before?" He smiled very slightly. He said, "I was a man who could not stay. I sat with him for a while. Then I stood up and I went back to my desk. I want to tell you about the train station because I have been remembering it and I owe it the truth. I left the house on Whitlock Avenue on the evening of June 17th, 2011, and I drove to a regional train station 43 minutes away. I did not take a train. I parked the car in long-term parking. I walked to the platform. I sat on a bench. I do not know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. The platform was mostly empty. A man came and sat down on the bench next to me. He was wearing a wool coat, although it was June and the night was warm. He had a kind face, the way some faces are kind without being friendly. He looked at me without looking at me. He said, "Are you sure?" I did not ask him who he was. I did not ask him what he meant. I knew what he meant. He meant, "Are you sure you are leaving?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Then come with me." We did not take a train. We walked. We walked across the parking lot and out the back gate and down a road I had not noticed and into a building I had not noticed. And a woman behind a desk gave me a laminated badge and a folded piece of paper. And the next thing I remember clearly is sitting at my desk in the office on a Wednesday in autumn and the words, "Welcome back," and the smell of bitter coffee, and a folder with somebody else's name on it that I had to close by the end of the week. I want to tell you what I did because what I did is the only part of this that matters now. I went to the community center on Friday morning. I waited until her break. She came out with the same paper cup of coffee. She sat on the same bench. I walked across the street and I sat down on the bench at the other end. I left enough space between us that she could leave if she wanted to. She looked at me. She looked at me for a long time. I do not know what she saw. I do not know what is in my face now. I know that I was older than the man in the photograph. I know that the years had done what years do. She said, "Are you who I think you are?" I said, "Yes." She did not stand up. She did not cry. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said, "How?" I said, "I came to find you. I came to tell you that I left. I came to tell you why, if you want to know why. I came to tell you that I am sorry, although I know that is not enough, and I do not expect it to be enough. I came so that you would not have to refile next June." She said, "You're alive?" I said, "Yes." She said, "All this time?" I said, "Most of it, I was not myself. I do not know if that helps. I know it probably does not. I am telling you because I want you to have the true version." She looked at her coffee. She held it in both hands. She had a small ring on her right index finger that I recognized. It had been her mother's. Her mother had bought it at a fair when we were dating before Marin was born, and she had worn it on a chain around her neck for years. And then on her finger when she got too thin for the chain to feel right. Marin was wearing it on her own finger now. It fit her. She had become a woman who fit her mother's ring. She said finally, "I built my life around looking for you." I said, "I know." She said, "I knew when I was 12 that you weren't dead. I knew. I don't know how I knew. I think I knew because my mother thought you weren't dead, and she told me so on the second day, when the hospice nurse was in the kitchen and we were alone, and she said, 'Your father has gone somewhere and someday you will find out where.' So I started looking when I was 12. I read about missing persons. I read about the protocols. I started writing letters when I was 15. I figured out how to file the extension paperwork myself when I was 17. I picked my major because of you. I picked this job because the community center has a missing persons resource program, and I thought one day someone might walk in who had walked away the way you walked away, and I would be the person who knew what to do." She said, "And here you are." She said, "And here you are, and you came to find me, and you are not what I built my life around. I do not know what to do with you." I said, "I do not know what to do with me either." She drank her coffee. She put the cup down on the bench between us. She said, "I am not going to forgive you today. I do not know if I will ever forgive you. I want you to know that." I said, "I know." She said, "But I am glad you are not dead. I am glad in a way I cannot describe, and I do not want to describe, and I am angry that I am glad. I am going to need a long time." I said, "Take whatever time you need. I am not going anywhere." She said, "You said that before." I said, "I know. I am saying it again because it is true now. I will be wherever you want me to be. I will be nowhere if you want me to be nowhere. I will not leave again." She stood up. She picked up her coffee cup. She looked at me one more time, and her face was her mother's face for a moment, the way faces sometimes are, and she said, "I have to go back to work." She crossed the street. She went back into the community center. She did not look back. I sat on the bench for a while. The man in the wool coat walked past the bench. He did not stop. He nodded at me as he went by. He kept walking. He turned the corner. I have not seen him since. I went back to the office on Friday afternoon. I sat at my desk. I opened the folder. I picked up a pen. I wrote "located" in the small box at the bottom of the cover sheet. I signed my initials beneath the word. I closed the folder and I walked it to Mr. Hewitt's office and I put it on his desk. He looked at the cover sheet. He looked at me. He nodded once. He said, "All right." He said, "You'll need to clear out your desk." I cleared out my desk. There was not much in it. A coffee mug, a pencil cup, a small framed photograph of nothing in particular that I had bought from a thrift store at some point and could not remember buying. I left the photograph for whoever got my desk next. I took the mug and the pencil cup. I gave my badge to Inez. She did not say "welcome back" this time. She said, "Take care of yourself, Daniel." It was the first time anyone in the office had called me by my first name. I want to tell you what I have now because I want to be honest about what is left. I have an apartment that I am being allowed to keep for a year. I have a stipend that is enough to live on if I do not eat well. I have a body that has aged the way a man's body ages in his 40s and 50s, and a face that does not match the face in the photograph, and a set of memories that has come back to me in fragments over the past 2 weeks, and that I expect will continue to come back for a long time. I have nightmares that are not really nightmares, but are simply the memory of a hospice nurse in the kitchen explaining the morphine schedule to me while my wife slept in the next room. I have a recurring memory of Moran at 5 years old eating a popsicle on a back porch and asking me where the sun goes when it goes down. I told her then that it went around to the other side of the world. I told her it would come back. I remember the sound of her thinking about that. I remember her nodding and going back to the popsicle as if the answer had been sufficient. I had been a man who gave my daughter sufficient answers. I had been that man for 8 years. Then I walked to a train station and answered a question from a stranger and stopped being him. I have twice a week a phone call with Marin. She set the schedule. She calls me. The calls are short. We talked about her job. We talk about the children at the community center. We have not talked about her mother yet. We do not talk about the years yet. She has told me that we will talk about those things eventually, and that I am to wait until she is ready. I am waiting. I have on my kitchen table a copy of the file. The office let me keep it. Mr. Hewitt said that some clerks who write locations keep the file and some throw it away, and that he had no advice for which to do. I read it sometimes. I read my wife's 3-sentence declaration. I read my daughter's longer one. I read the grocery list. The grocery list is the hardest. Soup for Carla in my handwriting, on a piece of paper that has been in a plastic sleeve for 14 years. It is the proof that the man who walked to the train station on June 17th, 2011, had intended to come home until he decided not to. He'd not even pulled into the grocery store parking lot. He had driven past it. He had decided somewhere on that drive that the soup for Carla was not going to happen, and that the apples were not going to happen, and that the bread and the milk were not going to happen, and that he was going to keep driving until he found a way out. And he had found one. I think about him sometimes. I think about him sitting on the front step smoking a cigarette. He did not usually smoke. And standing up and getting in the car and driving to a train station because he could not bear to watch her die. I do not forgive him. I do not have to forgive him. I am him. The only person in the world who is allowed not to forgive him is the woman who lived for 14 years thinking he was dead, and she has not forgiven him, and she may not ever, and that is the consequence I am living with, and the consequence I will continue to live with for as long as I have left to live. The office is still there. I walk past it sometimes when I'm in the city. The brick building, the brass plaque that says only government. Inez at the desk. I do not stop. I do not look in. I have not seen Mr. Hewitt or Bernice since the afternoon I cleared out my desk, and I do not expect to see them again. There are people inside that building who have been there longer than they remember and who do not know they have files in their own drawers. And there are people inside it who have been there a little while and who think they are starting a new job. And there is Mr. Hewitt on the 4th floor with his hands folded on his knees. And there is Bernice on the 3rd floor with a photograph of a dog she has not been allowed to meet. And the 4 floors of the building are full of people doing quiet work that the country does not know it has contracted out, and the work is necessary and the work is wrong. And both of those things are true at the same time. I think about Bernice often. I think about her son, who is now in his 50s and who has been told all his life that his mother died when he was a small child, and who has built a whole life on that story. I think about whether the kindness of letting someone grieve is worth what it costs the person who grants it. I do not know. Bernice does not know. Mr. Hewitt does not know. I think that may be the secret of the office, that it exists because no one knows. I will tell you the last thing, and then I will stop. I asked Mr. Hewitt on the day I cleared out my desk, what would happen if I ever needed to find someone? If I ever had a friend or a neighbor or a colleague who disappeared the way I disappeared. I asked him whether I would be able to do anything about it. whether I would be able to walk into the building and ask Inez to look in the system and tell me where they were. He said no. He said once a case is closed, it is closed. The office does not maintain a directory of its former clerks. It does not permit former clerks to interfere with current cases. It does not respond to inquiries from the outside. He said, "You will not be able to find anyone, Daniel. You used the door once. You used it to go in. You used it to come out. You will not be permitted to use it a third time in either direction." I said, "All right." He said, I am telling you this because I want you to understand that this is the last conversation you and I will have. I want you to understand that when you walk out of this building today, you walk out of it for good. Whatever you make of the rest of your life will be made out there. The office cannot follow you, and you cannot come back." I said, "All right." I shook his hand. I walked down 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was slow and I did not want to wait. I walked past Inez at the desk. I gave her my badge. She put it in a drawer. She did not look up. I walked out the front door into the late afternoon, and I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, and I felt the sun on my face the way you feel it after a long illness. And then I walked east toward the bus depot because Marin had a phone call scheduled with me at 7, and I wanted to be home by then. I am home by then. Most days now, I sit by the phone. She calls. We talk about small things. We are building slowly something that is not a relationship and is not nothing. And that may eventually become a kind of relationship or may not. I am not in a position to ask for more than that. I am not in a position to ask for anything. I am in a position to wait and to listen and to be present and to not leave. And that is the work of the rest of my life, and it is the only work I have left. I closed cases for an office that does not appear on any list of public services. I do not work there anymore. I am out and I am here, and the file with my name on it is closed and located. And somewhere in the office, a new clerk has my desk and does not know who used to sit there. Maybe he is doing well. I hope he is doing well. I hope they are all doing well. I hope when his file comes for him, he chooses the harder one. I hope he understands what it costs. I understand now why this happened. I wish I didn't.